on diversity and inclusion be more energetic and me having to like break up the room. I love this. But Lynn has been diligently going from section to section because she is our amazing leader that's been listening and is going to share some of what she had as takeaways.
All right, and I want to tell you the toughest problem here. I am left-handed, and I have always had bad handwriting. It has only gotten worse. I can no longer read my own grocery list, so that is going to be a super problem here, but I'm going to do the very best I can. I would agree that this has been a pretty remarkable discussion. I thought the panelists were really good. And the communication, the ideas around the table, I wish we could have videotaped every one of those. There were a couple of things that the whole thing made me think about. And one was the fact that we all need to keep a conscious awareness that we are likely unconsciously biased. And most of you talked about that at some level. How many of you have taken the implicit association test that's on the Harvard website? It's a really interesting thing to go to and look at it if you haven't done that. You all probably know all the studies of when they change names on resumes, people select different people, the same resume with a name that sounds African American or a name that sounds like. We just need to be aware of all those kinds of things and keep that in our heads. I just read a book called Incognito. If you haven't read that, it's by, I believe it's James Clear, but it will give you a lot of awareness of what is going on in your brain that you are not aware of. And if you can't be aware of that, it's hard to ever solve this problem. The other thing is, I think we know, and this I thought was a theme everywhere, that psychological safety, and that's a term that's being used now, is a key to diversity and inclusion. There was a project at Google called Project Aristotle, and they were trying to look, they knew that some of their teams were a whole lot more effective than other teams, and they were trying to figure out what it was. Was it personalities, introverts and extroverts? Was it where they came from, their background? They studied this for like 5 years and figured out that the thing that was the same about the effective teams is they all had strong psychological safety. And that means I'm free to state my opinion. I feel like I can bring my whole self to the team. Amy Edmondson at, I think, Harvard has been doing a lot of the work on psychological safety, and it's amazing work, and I think we're finding more and more. It's one of the reasons that inclusion pays off. Inclusion is great for the bottom line. The things I heard with the speakers, the panelists, that was great. I'm glad we're taping it. I have not seen that Burson study that 26% said they were doing diversity and inclusion efforts because it was right, and overwhelmingly they were doing it because it made them more money. That's a wonderful thing. We heard from Doug that it's important not just to check the box, but to know why we don't have harassment and discrimination in the workplace. What is it? How's the negative impact? Why is it good for you, not good for you, and not good for your coworker? And I love that we're becoming geniuses at intellectual solves problems, and geniuses prevent problems. This was the genius group, by the way. I think what Bill Garrett is doing at Cristo Rey is pretty amazing. And I was so impressed. I think we all know that part of the solution to this is being open, is saying things that are uncomfortable. And what he said about our responsibility, in my opinion, to take the people that are the least fortunate in this society and help them gain the skills so they will not, so to not have skill gaps when they go into the workplace is an incredibly important thing to do. And I'd love to see us as a society try to scale his programs. I loved Lisa saying that.
I love you too.
Thank you. That introvert, as an introvert, that introverts are important, and I love Jennifer's work too. Renee Murphy, and I just want to tell you, when I first saw this panel, did you know it was all white men? And today, thankfully, it was not all white men. So Renee said we must all contribute, and that getting all the ideas out is a part of what diversity and inclusion is. There's Anita Woolley, I believe it's her name, has done a lot of work on teams and found that the most effective teams, and this is when they were solving real problems, are people who all contribute, everybody contributes, speaks equally, and there's great emotional intelligence in the team. And they measured that by something that was developed for autism called the Mind in the Eyes test. And I think that kind of study is super important for what we're talking about here. I love the idea that economists can agree on the fact that innovation is what will get us out. I just love the fact that they can agree on something. Around the tables, I heard from this table, from Dan Valentine. He was saying he was reading a book by Martin Luther King, saying that we can affect behavior, but how do we affect our hearts? Deborah Klein was talking about, I believe, I heard the end of this, but was talking about how important culture and leadership is for change in organizations. And people were questioning whether you can take a leader and a team that's not working well and change them, and how would you do that? And Renee said that one of the things they found is that change requires either a new leader or a burning platform. It's probably, how am I doing on time? Do I have any left? Yeah, and I gotta read my writing. And Kelly was talking about generational issues with inclusion. And she talked about the fact that she was in a situation where she wasn't being heard, it was very uncomfortable, only people who were experienced felt like they were part of the team and were asked for ideas. And she took the initiative to speak up and to say, this is not working for me, you're not getting anything out of me, something like that, and help the situation somewhat. I think she finally left. But something that I think is it's also very important for this issue is creating cultures where feedback is normal. And there's some wonderful work going on now by Robert Keegan and Lisa Leahy around deliberately developmental organizations, where feedback is just a part of the culture. And there's a book called The Everyone Culture and in an article in Harvard Business Review that I'd suggest you look at. I want to close with just 3 points. One is a quick story from me. About 10 years ago, our oldest son began dating a young woman, he's now married to her, whose parents were born in Vietnam. She was born here. Now, our family had been going to Hilton Head, we have 2 sons, for years and years. I'd never had much awareness going to Hilton Head, but we went with Christine that year, and I had, who is clearly Asian, and I had a remarkable experience myself of realizing how unaware I was there, how unaware I was of the fact that there were very few people of color, very few people who did not look like me. And I thought after that, a question: how do we stay awake and aware and mindful? Why does it take something like that to become more mindful? last night, our minister, who is very young, took on the very tough job of leading a conversation about a Christian approach to the political process. And he brought in a lot. He's a great intellectual. I would say he is a genius. He brought in a lot of figures. And one of the people he quoted said, "How do we create a political culture worthy of the human spirit?" And he was talking about, how do we stay open? How do we stay uncertain? How do we stay respectful? And I would say, how do we create a workplace culture worthy of the human spirit? Some people talked about leadership, and Chris, our minister, has only been there for 5 years, but I would say that our congregation, if you measured it on a diversity and inclusion scale before he came, we might be a 4 or 5. I would say that now we are probably a 7 or an 8. And he has created a sense that we are the kind of people who are welcoming and inclusive. I think leadership is incredibly important. So my last question would be, how do we find or develop leaders who can bring out, as Lincoln said, the better angels of our nature?
Can I get an amen? I think you, Lynn, did a great job of pulling out a lot from the different groups, but also talking about a different way that we may frame this BHAG that we were talking about in a lot of different ways that may even sound more inclusive than the way we stated it at the beginning. So thank you for that. You know, it's a hard thing to try to shut this discussion down. So, as a friendly reminder, we do not have to shut this discussion down. Remember, we're doing crowd design solutions. So, make sure you go to the website, post your thoughts, your questions, things that maybe you heard that were your key takeaways. Also post your solutions, and if you prefer to have your video done, because you don't have to edit yourself, please feel free to go see our handy dandy photographer in the back, because we really would love to capture the energy and the spirit. And I'll be kind of combing through this as we look at some next actions. So thanks everybody for your generosity of spirit and thought this morning. And Paul, are we taking a break? We're taking a 7-minute break, a 5-minute break.